So here we are, D1 style cam lock. This particular machine, it's a D1.8. And we want to start out, we want to not pick up our chuck, but tighten up. Now, a lot of people, when they don't have a crane, if you pick up too much, you start pulling the lathe up, and then you got leveling issues with your lathe. And I really should have loosened it first, excuse me. Getting ahead of myself. I made Bert get the strap, and I wasn't even thinking. Okay. The D1 style, this particular one is a D1.8, and these are cam locks. So you loosen the cams, and each one of these, there's a little place where it lines up, and that's where the cam slot is at its fully open position. And there's different numbers for different sizes. The D1.8 has 6 of them. The D1.6 also has 6 of them. The D1.4, I think, has 3, but I forget. A D1, and actually a hammer doesn't hurt to tap on that instead of beating my hands up for no reason. A little snug. Now, we might as well mention this here while we're at this. Part of when you put these in, a lot of these machines, there's a mark. There's the lineup mark here, and there's usually at 90 degrees a mark too. So the way that that's supposed to be is when you tighten this, it's supposed to be, well, somewhere in this half of a turn, ideally just past the 90 degrees. This one's going a little bit far, actually. And I'll show you when we get here how you can adjust those. You will also find out on some machines you can't quite adjust them exactly where they're supposed to be. And what you're doing is adjusting the chuck. And then we also swap these chucks from one lathe to another. The ideal situation is you tune it to a particular lathe. So we have all of those lathes. Now we come back here and we go to get a little bit. You'll notice that it still has tension. It's still on there. And what you do, you want to take it off, is you tap it. And it should, from the pressure of it on there, it should lock on a little bit. If it doesn't, it's not fitting quite right. Now you can see the gap here, how it's narrow, how it's tight at the bottom and loose at the top. That means I'm not quite straight. So I can just jog it up just a little bit. Well, okay, so much for what I said. Yeah. There, yeah, that's what I was getting at. And that's also the point where it loosens up. But you can watch the gap top and bottom to gauge it a little bit. Now, if you don't have a crane, which a lot of people don't, real common thing that is done is people will take and they'll cut a wood block that fits on your ways real nice and then match it to fit the bottom of your chucks at just the right height so that your chuck will just drop down a little bit, go in there, slide it in and out. You'll see that in a lot of places. And you can. This one here is not too bad. I could pick it up, but I don't like sore backs these days. I used to always toss it in. But I don't know, it's probably a 90-pound chuck. You know, it's a nuisance, but the big thing is you're out forward, and older backs don't like being pried off that much. It's not just the fact of 90 pounds, it's the leverage that hurts you a little bit. Your 3-jaws are more, because there's parts and pieces inside of them. The 4-jaw chuck is actually the lighter ones. When you are, we go out here a little ways, go a little bit west, and I'll just go this way. I'll just go further north to the back of the shop. We're going to take this away, and you can see how we got crud in here. Of course, there's going to be crud in there because there's open space at the back. Before you mount these, you want to get that clean. And you can see times when somebody, I got one right there, somebody didn't pay attention. They left a chip in there and it indented. And you can live with some of that for a while, and sometimes you can stone them out if there's a little ridge. But there really shouldn't be any of that. First 10 years, I was the only one that ran this lathe. I had absolutely none of those in there because I'd been at other shops where we had those marks. And, but having employees, not to blame anyone, you're going to have some of those that show up. It just happens. So you can't get too annoyed with it. Now what we're trying to do here, this is a very slight press fit. It's a tapered and it's a press fit. So what you're trying to do is get this so that it just barely is pressing on that taper, and that centers it for round, and it stops on this face. So when these get too beat up on a machine, you see there's an undercut here. That's so that you can set this to the right place. You can actually take your tool post grinder and you grind a little bit off of this and you grind a little bit off of this. So you take them both down so that they're true. And it depends on, like normally what you'd want to do would be you'd take this down, and it's going to be true because it's true with the spindle. You'd take this down with your tool post grinder so that it comes in and has a nice surface. And then you'd keep dressing this down, and you can figure out the math. Put your chuck on here, push your chuck back and forth. See how much it moves. Bob was just doing his, he said it was 7 degrees, 7 minutes, and 30 seconds, I think was what he said, but don't quote me on that. You can look it up. There are standards for the different ones. When I'm doing it, I do look it up and dial it in correct. But anyway, so you'd clean this up, and then you put your chuck on here, and you could move it back and forth. You could figure out how much to take off of this, and then you start giving it a little bit more, because you want what would be on this taper to fit the other taper. You're going to want a 1/2 to 1/1000 press in there. So you can take the indicator, see the movement between the two to tell you where 0 is, but you may have to go a little bit more than what's calculated to get the correct press that you want. Generally, you're going to want to come in here and get it close and then just take a little bit off of this at a time. It's been so long since I've reground one. I don't remember if I take off 1/1000 on this face at a time or 5/1000. I really don't remember how brave I get. It's been a long time since I've done one. So I can't give you exactly how much I go at a time before I go checking it. I think it's probably more like 5/1000 at a time because this is a pretty flat taper. And 1/1000 on this is going to be like maybe, definitely not a 1/10 of a thousandth. There's going to be very little on this. So you probably want to take more than 1/1000 off per check. But it's better to take off less because if you take off too much, then you have to come back and set up and address this one and make it smaller so that it's small enough that it will come up and hit on the face back there. Another way you can do this, well, no, you really can't. I was going to say we could leave this too big, grind this back, and use the feeler gauge, but then you really don't know how much to take that down that easily. No. It's easier to get this cleaned up and then bring the face back until it's just snug, until it just gives you where it holds on. These ones here, yeah, these pins, they're threaded, and generally they're loose. You don't start getting one of these. You go buy a new chuck or something. You don't just tighten these down. You put them in here, and you can put them in at first. You can just thumb in this screw here that keeps them from turning. It's got a cutout in there so that the head of the screw comes in there and keeps that from turning around a whole bunch. But you've got one, it's a fine thread, you've got one rotation of difference as to where those go. And so you adjust those to get the camming that you're looking for. And I don't know if we can see it in here. I built one of these as an adapter one time. That's kind of an interesting thing. You can actually take these apart and let's see. So it goes in. Yeah, you can see how it's down low there and the metal's high there. It's a high point in the metal. So that high point in the metal would grab the lug as you're tight. Well, yeah, it would be high on this side. The part we can't see, it would be high over here. And we'd be grabbing the lug as we push it. Does it make sense? It goes this way and it pulls it. So it's got to go into that cut, and cam it. What it's doing is it's pulling it in, is what it's doing. Anyway, you can figure it out if you take one apart. I don't have it all in my mind right now. It's been a few years since I built the one. The one I built was built in 96-ish, somewhere in there, about 1996 when I built one. What I did was we had a lathe that was a D111, and we had a D1 surplus of D1 6 chucks for another lathe, but there was no way for the back of the lathe, and we had good size spindle hole. A lot of times we wanted to work with smaller stuff, and so I made an adapter to fit on the other side of the headstock so that we could put the D1 6 chucks on here and use those to stabilize smaller stock in the lathe, so we'd have two chucks on it. I used it a couple times. I don't know if they've lost it or if they kept it there at the mine. But anyway, if it's floating around at Red Dog Mine, I'm the one that made it. Threads into that lathe may not even be there, 30 years, things change. I know they got rid of the little lathe. It was a Nardini. That one went down to the Seward Training Center. They gave it away to the Seward Training Center. It was a very comfortable lathe to run for the way it was designed, but it was a very lousy lathe as far as the quality of materials and precision. It was kind of a piece of not real good for the quality of it, but it was nice to run as far as the layout of the handles and things. It wasn't bad that way. But yeah, make sure everything's clean. Chuck them up, tighten them up. I usually go in here, I will tighten one a little bit, another one, skipping 3, and then I'll come back, snug them all, and then I'll make sure I get them all really tight after that. Clean is the big thing, and it's nice to understand how this system works. I really like the cam lock style because it's common, a lot of interchangeable, and it doesn't stick as bad as the other styles you've got. Like this one is what they call an A style on this lathe. And that just means it's sort of the same. It's got a little mounting spigot that sticks out the same as that, but it bolts on. Instead of using cams, it bolts on. So these are not that handy or normally changed. Those, it just bolts on, it stays on there. They have one that's called an L series for a long taper, and that is a long, it's a long tapered nose. It's got a key in it. They work really good. They were really popular on Lodge and Shipley's and LeBlanc's in the 50s and 60s. They really grab good. They hold good. Pain in the ass to be changing chucks, though, because that long taper will get stuck. And the nut that draws it on is also the one that pushes it off. And sometimes you can pound on that nut to where you just about wear the threads out of it, taking it back off. They can really get stuck on there if you haven't changed one in a year or something. So they work, they're solid, they're rigid. There's a lot of good to be said about them once the chuck is on, but they're not as quick and easy to change. So that's why that fell out of favor and this cam style took over. And it doesn't rely on a flat face. It's a long nose taper. The taper seats it all the way. Another ones you see threaded spindles, which we've got a threaded spindle in our treadle lathe that we got out there, our pedal. Yeah, pedal lathe. It's not treadle, it's pedal. They called it a velocipede, was what Barnes called it. Anyway, our pedal lathe, you'll see that on your little Atlas lathes. And it's just a thread, and the idea is you've got a threaded area that your chuck goes on, and then there's a little step that is supposed to center it up. Very seldom does the step fit close enough to center it very well, and they're just, that's the terriblest. That was the earliest of the quick interchangeable changing chucks, and if it's what you got, use it, love your tools, even if it's not the choice one, but they don't normally center up really good. If you have one of those with a 3-jaw, which a lot of people do, really get yourself a 4-jaw. You really, even more than other people, because of the inaccuracy of the mounting style, you'll really like having a 4-jaw once you get used to it. And yeah, anyway, chucks, mounting.